today. An initiative taken by the Taoiseach, but very much a government initiative as well, and an opportunity to discuss in an in-depth way the future of our international security and defence policy. Ireland is a country that is militarily neutral. We do not intend to join any military alliance, but we've never been politically neutral, and we've always stood up for particular principles: multilateralism, democracy, human rights, equality. Have taken part in peacekeeping missions with the UN for decades now. But security threats are changing. We face new forms of warfare, cyber attacks, industrial espionage, international terrorism, and we've seen how energy, for example, and refugees can be weaponised from the war in Ukraine. So it is important that we build up our own defence capability, and we're going to do that, and we're doing that at the moment, and also that we cooperate with our allies in the European Union, through PESCO, of which we're a founder member, and also allies like the UK, the US, Canada and others through cooperation with NATO and the Partnership for Peace.
Did you take the reaction to the resignation of Dee Forbes this morning, and do you believe she should come before an Oireachtas committee this week?
Yes, so I heard this morning that Dee Forbes has resigned as DG of RTE. I still think, though, that she should come before the Oireachtas committee. She's issued a very strong statement. I think people would like to hear her side of the story and her version of events, and it's still open to her to attend the committee hearings, and I believe she should.
Do you have confidence in RTE? And also this review that the government is going to take about 7 months. Is that really good enough for the public now to wait 7 months for any sort of an answer?
Yeah, you know, first of all, I'm very disappointed about what we've learned about payments at RTE, particularly the way those payments were made. In response to that, the government has initiated a thorough review of the governance of RTE, and Minister Martin will brief Cabinet on that today, and we should have the terms of reference ready within a week or two. To do an in-depth and thorough governance review will take a few months, so we'd rather do it right than do it quickly. And in the meantime, we're suspending our work on the reform of the TV licence. But I do want to say this. It is important that we understand what all the facts are, and that's why the Oireachtas committees in particular have an important role to play in making sure that we get answers to questions, that there is full accountability, and that will play out over the course of the next few weeks. But I do want to point out that RTE is a big organisation. The vast majority of people who work for RTE would have had no knowledge or involvement in this whatsoever. And indeed the board would only have known about it relatively recently, so we need to bear that in mind. And also we need to make sure we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Public service broadcasting is important. RTE in very many ways plays a really important role in our society, from Irish language broadcasting, children's programmes, drama, sport, good quality news. We need to be cognizant of that. If things were done that were wrong, and I believe things were done that were wrong, that needs to stop, it needs to change, and people need to be held to account. But we need to bear in mind that the vast majority of people who work in that organisation would have had no role in this, and it does a lot of good work, and we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of that.
Do you have confidence in RTE right now?
Oh, I do. I certainly have confidence in the board, and the board are responsible for RTE, and I've confidence in the institution as a whole. But that is different from saying that what happened was okay. It wasn't. We need to get to the bottom of that. We need to find out exactly what all the facts are, and then we need to make sure that individual accountability occurs. But that's not to say that the whole organisation is flawed. I think that would be unfair.
Do you think that Claire Byrne's step this morning to outline that what her salary is and that she hasn't been paid any top-ups, do you think that other RTE top 10 paid presenters should take that step as well?
Yeah, look, I think they're going to want to do that. Inevitably, they're all going to be asked about the fees that they receive and whether they receive additional fees indirectly. So I think it makes sense. It is up to them, of course, but I do think it makes sense and it's sensible from their point of view for them to clarify that, yes.
Taoiseach, you wonder that top executives in RTE could shrug their shoulders and walk away and wash their hands of this crisis and not have accountability. What can the government do to ensure that?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is get to the bottom of this and find out what all the facts are. As things stand, there is no suggestion that anything illegal occurred, but we need to establish that for sure, and then also whether there are any breaches of ethics or breaches of code of conduct. So the most important thing now, I think, is achieving accountability, and the way you achieve accountability is finding out all the facts. So the government's review will be important in that regard, but also the hearings that the Oireachtas committees are going to hold. And I would encourage anyone, including the former DG, to participate in that, set out the facts, set out the details, and then we can take it from there.
The government heard about this before anyone else did. Do you think that the way RTE has handled this crisis and communicating it to the public has been disappointing? How do you think they've handled this, given you knew about it before the public did?
Sorry,
shortly before, anyways.
Yeah, well, look, there's a reporting line, and it is from the board to the minister and the minister to the government and the Taoiseach. So I would have been informed about this about a week ago. Perhaps we should have been informed sooner. That's one of the things we're going to have to establish. But I also understand that before a public body, and bear in mind there are thousands of public bodies in the state, often before they inform the minister or the government, they want to get all the facts right first, because you don't want to get a half story and then be told a few days later or a few weeks later that it's actually a different story. But that's something we're going to have to figure out and establish, is whether the minister and the government should have been informed sooner.
What about remedial measures in your statement the other day? What do you mean by remedial measures? What do you have in mind?
Nothing specifically at this stage, but like I say, the most important thing now is the governance review, which the government has commissioned, and from that we'll be able to establish whether changes need to be made in how RTE operates and is run. And in terms of remedial measures, I think the most important thing in the short term is that there be accountability, that RTE staff, board members as appropriate, the former DG, would actually tell their story and tell their side of the story, because we don't know all the facts yet, and it is important that be established, because that's the first step to accountability.
The government has asked for a governance review. How can you say you have confidence in the board if the government has seen necessary to undertake a review into how the board does its business?
I do have confidence in the board, based on the facts and information that I have to date, and that the board is relatively new. The chair, only appointed in the last few months, did not make these decisions in relation to payments or indirect payments, and has taken action to deal with it. So I have confidence in the board.
And Taoiseach, there are committee meetings coming up and there's an external review. But pending all of those procedures, do you think it would be a good idea for Ryan Tubridy to hand back the other payments this time?
Oh, look, that really is a matter for him, and you'll have heard me say it before, and I'll say it again. I believe every citizen in the state should be afforded the presumption of innocence. So we don't know all the facts yet. I do think it's important that people come before Oireachtas committees, tell us their side of the story, allow us all to get the facts out there, and then we can determine the next steps after that.
Ryan Tubridy should offer himself up for the committee.
I think if the committees invite him to speak, he should be willing to do so.
Taoiseach, you were asked a question when I spoke upstairs about, or downstairs about, committing to a referendum on NATO membership. Would you commit to that now? I know you said we have no intention of joining, but would you commit to if there was a push for NATO membership?
No, like it's not the intention of this government or any of the three parties that make up the government to join NATO. You know, I've never heard of the idea of having a referendum about not joining an organisation. You know, you have a referendum because you're going to join an organisation. We've decided to join the European Union, and as part of the Lisbon Treaty, when people voted for the Lisbon Treaty, we voted to be part of PESCO, which is the European Common Foreign Security and Defence Policy, and that's where we are. There isn't a requirement to have a referendum to join NATO. I think if we were ever to contemplate that, we probably would have to have a referendum, but that's not on the agenda of this government.
Taoiseach, can I ask you what you are going to, in court, the Taoiseach was speaking about what type of closer cooperation there might be in the context of PESCO, when he was talking about maritime safety, he was talking about other issues like that. Are there ideas that you have where there could be closer cooperation, whether through PESCO, through PAP or anything else?
Yes, so the way PESCO works is that we sign up to particular projects and particular programmes on a case-by-case basis. We signed up to a few already. In terms of security threats that I'd be most concerned about, a cyber attack is one, another is international terrorism, a third would be attacks on infrastructure, particularly around our seas. So they're the kind of projects that I'd be most interested in us getting involved in. But what we do is, when a project is proposed by the European Commission, or rather by the European Union, we then examine whether or not it suits us and suits our plans to take part in it. And we do have a very active independent foreign policy in that regard. As I said inside, we're a country that's participated in UN peacekeeping missions for decades now. We're part of the Partnership for Peace. We're part of PESCO. We've opened new embassies, new offices all around the world. We have an ODA budget of over €1 billion now. We have a very active, independent foreign policy. But it makes sense that we think about what that's going to look like in the next 10 or 20 years, because the world has changed. We had the Cold War, which ended. Then we had a period when America was dominant in the world after the Soviet Union collapsed. And we're now moving into a different world again that's much more multipolar. We see the rise of China. We see Russia invading its neighbours. And we need to think about how all that impacts on us.
The hate speech bill makes gender a protected characteristic, but Michael McDowell and others have noted that the Gender Recognition Act only recognises 2 genders, while the hate speech bill explicitly refers to more genders than just male or female. Your Shannon leader, Senator Regina Doherty, previously said that there are about 9 genders. So how many genders are there, and can we get the government's official position on that?
Look, there isn't official position on that, but I'm sure that will all be debated in the course of the debates in the Shannon.
Okay, thanks folks. Thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot.